What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In our last video, we set up the Proxmox Backup Server. A few of you guys had questions about using PBS, which is Proxmox Backup Server, to back up the Proxmox host itself, meaning the machine that's actually running Proxmox. I put up a poll, you guys voted to see a video on it, so that's exactly what we're going to do. As always, chapters are listed below, so feel free to jump to whatever section interests you the most. And hey, don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, and definitely do not forget to share. Every little bit that you can do will help the channel grow, and I really do appreciate it. All right, let's get into it. This video is sponsored by yours truly, myself. Yes, I'm sponsoring my own videos, but in all seriousness, I'm a project-based learner. That means I learn by doing projects. So I'm putting together a project-based series that's not your typical polished content that you see online. So no skipping the hard work, no guru shortcuts. It's all about the real process. That means the wins, the struggle, the moments where things break and how it all gets put back together, from the first idea to building it out step by step. It's all about real project, like building a CI/CD pipeline, Homelab setups, and the messy stuff in between that most people don't show. I'm still piecing it all together, but if you want in, hit the link in the description box below, head over to my website, and subscribe to the newsletter. You'll be the first to know when it drops. I appreciate the support and thank you guys so much for watching, liking, and commenting on the videos. I really do appreciate it. Let's go ahead. Let's get this video started. All right, so there are basically two approaches that you can take when backing up your Proxmox host. Option one is the manual configuration backup. This is where you back up the config file for your Proxmox host. So this doesn't include things like your VM and your container. It includes the config file for your VM and container and storage, but it doesn't include the VM itself. So the storage for the VM and all those other components that has to do with storage doesn't include that. It just includes the config for your VM and for your container and for your Proxmox host. So basically you can back up the important Proxmox configuration files, and this is important, the configuration files and folder manually to an external storage location. So this includes things like the etc PVE, which is the Proxmox config and VM definition folder, etc network interfaces, which is kind of like the network settings folder, etc passwd and etc shadow, which is related to user account, and then you have the etc hostname, of course, which is your system hostname, and then you have the etc systemd, which is kind of like the service configuration folder. Option two is a full system image or bare metal backup. This option is to do a full bare metal backup of your system. This is the less stressful method, so if something breaks, you just restore the entire system image and everything comes back up exactly the way it was. The downside to this is that it can take up a lot of storage space since you're backing up your whole system, and the hardware difference between your old and your new machine can sometimes cause capability issues. For this video, I'll focus on the first option, so using Proxmox Backup Server, PBS, with the Proxmox Backup client to back up the host config file. If you guys do want to see a deep dive into the bare metal backup process, I'll put up a poll and we can cover that in another video before I move on to the hardware upgrade video that I'm currently working on. The ideal setup is to run both methods together. For example, you can do a weekly file/folder level backup of your config files, and then you can do a monthly full bare metal backup. That way you will have both lightweight backups for small issues and full system image for worst case scenario. It's all about peace of mind. When you're setting up something that you really don't think that you can rebuild it from scratch again, you most likely want to do something like that. So out of the box, PBS does not give you a backup host option, but it does provide the Proxmox Backup Client. It's basically a Linux command line tool that lets you back up and restore data from any Linux system directly over to PBS. Since Proxmox is just Linux under the hood, we can use the backup clients to automatically send all of our important config files from the Proxmox host to the PBS. That way, our host config and our VM backup lives in the same place, safe, secure, and ready to be restored anytime. So here's the game plan. We're going to use PBS plus the Proxmox Backup client to back up our host config files. We're going to create a script to automate the backup process with cron so it runs on schedule without us touching it. Then we're going to test the restore process so you can see how it all comes together. The first step is creating a PBS user account and API key. This is what the Proxmox host will use to authenticate and send backups over to the PBS server. So let's go ahead and create that account. All right, so let's kick things off by taking a look at the two Proxmox hosts that we're going to be using for this demo. So we have Proxmox Demo 1 and then we have Proxmox Demo 2. Proxmox Demo 1 is where everything is set up right now. So we have a VM, a container, some network config, and some storage and all this other good stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to back things up from Proxmox Demo 1 to our PBS server, and then we're going to restore it to Proxmox Demo 2, which is kind of like a bare bone host right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So Proxmox Demo 1, which is PVE1, this is what it looks like right now. So we have a couple of things set up on it already. So if we go to network, for example, we have 3 NICs, we have 2 bridge, default bridge, and a bridge that we created. If we scroll down and we go to disk, we have a directory storage that's already set up, and I'm going to expand this as well. And then we have a ZFS storage that's also set up. So we have those 2 disks there, and then we also have the Proxmox Backup Server that's already connected to it. And if we expand the virtual machine, we have one virtual machine that we configure, which is Ubuntu. This is what that looks like right now. Right, and then if we go to container, we also have one container that's set up as well. And that container, this is what it looks like right now. And that container is already being backed up to the PBS server, as well as the VM is also being backed up to the PBS server. The idea is to kind of simulate having an environment that's already working and it completely crashed. We turn it off and we restore it on this guy, which is PVE2. So PVE2 is bare bone right now. Nothing is installed on it. This is what it would look like when you want to kind of restore things over to a new host. So you will first install Proxmox, and then we're going to go through the restoration process, right? So this is what PVE1 looks like right now, and this is what PVE2 looks like right now. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go to the Proxmox Backup Server. So let me go to that. Right. Actually, before we talk about the user accounts, this is our data store right now. And if we click on it, we can see that test CT1, which is 101, which is our Proxmox, our container on our Proxmox server. And then we have our test VM, which is also our VM on our Proxmox server. Both of those are currently being backed up, and we're going to restore those, right? So good. Okay. So the first step in this whole process is that we need to create an account, right? We need to create an account that's going to allow or facilitate the communication between, let me go back up here so it's not distracting. We need to create an account that's going to facilitate the communication between our PBS server and our Proxmox server, so it allows our Proxmox server to be able to send data over to our PBS server. And to do that, we're going to go to configuration, we're going to go to access control, we're going to go to add, and then we are going to go to here, and we're going to enter what we want to call this user account. And we're going to call it, let's say, BSCK backup, right? And then we're going to leave the authentication server as default. And then we're going to set a password here, all right? And then we're going to tab, and then we're going to set that password again. Hopefully it match. And then for expiration date, we're going to leave it as default. For this guy, we're going to say this is a test. All right. Exclamation. First name and last name, we're going to leave blank. We don't care about that. Email, we're going to leave blank, but you are welcome to enter that if you need to. Click on add. And the other thing that we're going to create is we're going to create an API token. Now, you could technically just use the username and the password to set up the script or to facilitate the communication between your Proxmox virtual environment and your Proxmox backup server. However, in my opinion, I think that setting up an API key is just much more better. Reason being that if you were to change the password for the user account, as long as the API key is up and running, you're good to go. The user is able to validate with just the API key and the user account without the password. So we're going to go to API token. We're going to add an API token, and we're going to say we want this API token to be able to be managed by a Proxmox Backup Server user. And we're going to call it host. I'm going to say backup. All right, you can call it whatever you want. And then I'm going to say this is a test again. All right, exclamation there. And then no expiration date. It is enabled. We're going to click add. Now, what is very important is that these two things, we're going to need them when we're going to test things over in our PVE server. So you want to make sure, one, you copy this guy over somewhere that is easy for you to remember, right? Because we're going to need it. And then most importantly, you want to make sure you copy your secret. Your secret is something that you do not share, right? For me, this is kind of a demo. As soon as this is done, of course, it will be deleted. And that's why you're able to see that right now. But it will be deleted, and even if it wasn't a demo, I would not keep the secret up after I run some sort of like a video and things like that. So it's very important for you not to be sharing your secrets. So make sure you copy those two things, and we're going to click X, right? So now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to assign the right permission to both the user account and the API token so that they have access to our data store, our dev PBS data store. To do that, we're going to go to permission, we're going to go to add, we're going to go to user permission, and we're going to click on the drop down here, and then we're going to say we want it to have access to this guy. Now, you can give it access to your data store, but that is not the most secure way to do things, because if you're giving access to your whole data store and you have different data store set up in this environment, that account is probably going to have access, not probably, that account is going to have access to everything in here, especially if you propagate that and you push that down. So be very careful here. For just safety reason, just give the user access to the only thing that they need access to, which in my case is just this guy. All right. So I'm going to go there and I'm going to say backup PBS because that's a user account. And the access that we want to give it is this guy right here, the backup, the data store backup. So I'm going to go back one more time, this guy right here. I'm going to click add. And we're going to do the same thing for our token. So same concept. We're going to say we wanted to have access to this guy. And of course, we want our token, which is the only one that we have. And we wanted to have this access. Be mindful here because you do not want to be giving access to things, to an account, to an API token, giving it access to things that you don't want it to have access to. So be very careful here. So we're going to propagate as well because we want that permission to be pushed down, right? So now we have two of these guys right here. Both of them will propagate being pushed down. And that's pretty much it. So now we have our account. We have an API token. Now we should be able to set things up for our Proxmox server to be able to communicate with our PBS server with no issue. Now that we've got our PBS user account and API keys set up, the next step is to test everything out. We just want to make sure we can grab our config files from the Proxmox host and push them over to our PBS server with no issue. So let's go ahead and let's test that out. Actually, hold on. Before we get into that, let's first talk about the folders I'm going to back up for this demo. Now, keep in mind that what you decide to back up is completely up to you and your environment. To keep things simple, however, I'm just going to focus on two main folders for this video. The first folder is the etc/pve folder. This is the core Proxmox configuration directory. It holds everything from the VM and container definition to storage settings and cluster configurations. The next one, number 2, is the etc/network folder or directory. This is where your node's network configuration live. Include things like interface files that define your bridge, your bonds, and your IP assignments. I'm choosing these two because they are the most critical for your Proxmox host. If you have these two backup, you can rebuild your host and get your environment back on its feet much faster. Plus, keeping the demo focused on just these two makes it super easy to follow along without overcomplicating things. But just keep in mind that you can back up whatever folder you want. With that being said, let's go ahead let's start backing things up. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to validate and make sure that the user account that we just created and the API token that we just created is working correctly, and it's able to be used to back up data to the Proxmox server, to the Proxmox Backup Server. And to do that, we're going to go back to our PVE1 host here, because again, remember, this is what we're creating a backup of to restore it to PVE2, right? So we're going to go back to PVE1. We're going to go to the shell. So you can just click on the host, click on shell, and I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to copy this over here so we can talk about this real quick. It's just easy to copy over, and then I'll talk about it. So what we have here now is that we're creating a temp variable, and in that variable, so PBS repository is one variable. And in that variable, we're storing the user account. Remember, our user account is PB. Our user account is this guy right here. Is PB backup at PBS. And then we are referencing the API key, the API token name, which is host underscore P backup. And then the exclamation here is just the separation between the name and the API key name here. And of course, this is the IP address for the PBS server. So this is the main IP address for the PBS server. If you already have DNS set up in this environment, my DNS server is off because I'm also working on a couple other things to migrate some things, but don't worry about that. But if you have a DNS server, then you can reference the DNS name of your PBS server here. But for now, I'm just going to use IP address. And then we're telling it like, hey, we want to connect to the dev PBS server. Because remember, when we set up permission, we give permission, we give the backup user and the key, the API key permission to the dev PBS data store. So that's very important, right? And then we're creating another variable. So this is another variable. This is where the first variable ends. And then we created another variable here, and we're calling it PBS pass WD. And then we in that variable, we're storing our API token, right? So this would allow us to be able to use this to log into the PBS server and run the backup and then grab the things from here and then send it over. And this is also what we're going to use in our script, but we're just testing things right now to make sure it works. So if I was to click enter, right, and now if I was to do something like ACHO and do PBS underscore PSSWRD SSWRD here, and then click enter. Oh, sorry, echo. I need a $sign in front of that because it's a variable. So as you can see here, now it's echoing that out. This is what is currently stored on this guy right here. However, this is kind of a temp thing, right? So this session that we're in right now, we have this variable store. If we were to get out of the session and get back into it, and then we clear this, go one up, try to do that, you're going to see that that's empty now because that has been cleared out. Again, we don't care too much about that for now because we're just running test, right? So, but if I was to go back up here and then click enter again, get out of that, go back here, do that, we can see that that has been stored. So now that we have our username, our token, our IP address for the PBS server, and our data store location all stored in this session, what we're going to do now is going to run another command to try to see if we can test our backup. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to minimize this for a minute because it's a bit distracting there. I'm going to copy this command over and I'm going to paste that over. So basically now what we're doing with this command, let me go back. What we're doing with this command here, just click home. What we're doing with this command, we're saying that, hey, we're using the Proxmox Backup tool to say like, hey, run the Proxmox Backup client. And then what we want to do is we want to create a backup. And what we're doing here, we're saying that like, hey, create a backup. And we want to call this backup a host-configuration. And we want to store it in the archive format for Proxmox. And this is what we're trying to back up. So basically, we're calling it this, and we're storing it in this format. And this is the location that we're trying to back up here. And if you go down one more, it's pretty much the same thing. We're saying that like, hey, this is the name of this backup. This is what we're trying to, the format that we're trying to put it in. And this is the location that we're trying to back up here. And then down here, basically what we're doing, we're saying that, hey, we want the name for this whole thing to be called Proxmox host config. Now you can call this whatever you want. You can call this Proxmox test, Proxmox backup, Proxmox, whatever you want. But I just decided to call it Proxmox host config. Now, this is what we're backing up. So I'm just gonna get out of this real quick, and I'm going to do cd caps lock is on, cd etc here, and then PVE, enter. So this, we're backing up everything in this folder. So as you can see in this folder right now, we have the QEME server, we have the user config, we have the storage config, we have a couple of things in here, right? So this is what we're currently backing up when we run that command. So I'm going to get out of that one more time, and I'm going to go up. It's fine. Actually, let me just copy that over because I don't think I ran it, so it didn't store in history. So again, let me just get out of this. One more time here, go down. This is what we're running right here. So we're going to go ahead and click enter. And if everything works correctly, it should be able to grab these two things here and be able to send them over to our backup server. If it when you run it, if it asks you like, hey, do you want to connect to the server, you just go to type in yes and then click enter, and then it's going to ask you for both. And if it does, just click yes and click enter. And if everything works correctly, we should run into no issues. So I'm going to go ahead and click enter. In our case, everything works correctly, and it's telling us that like, hey, this has been backed up, you're good to go. So now, ideally, once we're over on the Proxmox Backup Server, you're not going to see it immediately. You will need to click reload for you to be able to see it, right? And now we can see that this guy has been backed up. This is what we decided to call it. So remember, proxmox-host-config. Again, you can call this whatever you want. So if I expand it, we can see it here, and it gives us the date and time that this, I'm going to expand this a little bit, that this stuff was taken. If I scroll down a little bit, you can see host config.pxar. Right, and then you're going to see network config.pskr. Now, if I go to this here and I come over here a little bit and I click on that, you can see all the things that are back up in here. I can download this, guys, if I want to. So if I want to download the storage config, I can go ahead and download it and then take a look at it. So this is what I was saying earlier, where I said that like before you start restoring things, you can always come in here and just look at things and say like, okay, this is what my old host used to look like. Okay, these are some of the things that I need to keep in mind before I restore the data that I need to restore, right? So I'm going to X out of this. If I go into network here and I go to here as well, you can see all of the interfaces here. Again, I can download this and be able to take a look at it if I need to, just to kind of get myself ready for a restoration. So now we pretty much know that our config is working the way it's supposed to work well. Our API token and our password is working the way that it's supposed to work. Now, I'm going to delete this. I don't need to, but I'm going to, because when we create a new one, it should just be another one right here. Actually, no, for clarity's sake, I'm going to delete it. And then what we're going to do next now is we're going to create a script that's going to run at a specific time interval all the time, so that the backup is being able to be done automatically without us getting involved. But for clarity's sake, I am just going to go ahead and delete this, and you can just do that by clicking that. It's going to ask you to type in host Proxmox host config gs gs must have yep, Proxmox CROXMOX, and then click enter. It's going to go ahead and remove that, so that's perfect. So now we're going to go back to our PVE1 server here, and now the next thing that we need to do now is we need to create a script. So we're going to go ahead and create that script. And to create that script, of course, we're going to do nano. We're going to put it in the root. Again, you can put this wherever you want, but for now, I'm going to put it in the root, and we're going to call it Proxmox Backup Proxmox config.sh. I'm going to click enter, and I'm going to copy the config over here, and we can talk about it. So I'm going to paste that in. So this is what the config look like for this guy right here. So again, I'm going to hold on, just to make things clear a little bit. I'm going to enter this guy. All right, so just move to a different line, and I'm going to back that up there. And then put that back there. Okay, so this is what the script looked like. And just keep in mind that I'm going to add all of this over on the blog, the initial one that we just ran to test, and this one, it's going to be on the blog, so you can check it out and be able to just copy and paste. And the things that you're going to need to replace, of course, is your API token, and then your name of your backup username, and of course the host, the API key, name, as well as all this other stuff, right? So this guy, which is going to be your backup server, and of course the data store that you want to use, and then your API token. So the script in itself is pretty straightforward, pretty self-explanatory, right? So again, we're just creating a variable here, and we're creating another variable called date. And the reason for the date here is because when we run a backup here, we want to initially when you run this, right? So this guy, when we run this guy, if we go, I deleted it, but I'll show you guys. So if we run that script again, you're gonna notice that the Proxmox Backup Server automatically adds a date to the top of it. But it's also cool. But what you're also going to notice that is that it didn't add a date on the config file that it was backing up. But it's also cool to be able to add that date on those config file as well. So it's easier for us to be able to say like, oh, okay, this is the day for this config file. When something else running, it was like, okay, this was running that day. It just helps keeps things a little bit organized. Like, you don't have to add it, but I really recommend that you add it because it just makes it a little bit easier. So this is just a variable, and this is just pretty much just adding that variable, putting this information from this variable and just adding it to this guy before it sends it over. So same concept, backup. This one is backing up the etc.pve folder, and this time I called it etc.pve, and then the network etc.network, and then same concept here is putting it in this archive format. And then this is, of course, is the repository. Is just calling this guy right here, right? So it's just calling this guy right here. So every time you see this red, it's just calling a variable. And again, the name here as well. For fun, we can go ahead and say, let's try to change this name. Let's move that up. Let's just call it Proxmox host, just for fun. We're going to do Control X, and then we're going to say yes, we want to save it. Click enter, and then if we go back into it, we can see that it's good to go. So I'm going to click Control X again. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to make this script executable. So I'm going to do this here because I'm being lazy. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to get chmod, and I'm going to do +X. +X. Basically, this is going to change the permission for the script to become executable. So I'm going to go ahead and click enter. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And the next thing that we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and open the cron tab. So it's going to be CRONTAB -E. All right. So I'm going to click enter. It's basically going to ask you, hey, what do you want to use to open this guy? You can use Vim or you can use Nano. Of course, we're going to use Nano. And this is what it looks like right now. So the cron basically allows you to schedule things for your server. So at a particular time, you can set things up. So at a particular time, it automatically runs and it automatically back up your config file without you having to get involved at all. So what we're going to do is I'm going to paste this in. Again, all of these commands are going to be on the blog. So just make sure you up over there to be able to find this command. So right now we're telling it to run at 2 a.m. But we don't want it to run. Maybe I should let it run at 2 a.m. That's another thing as well, right? If your config files are normally not that big, so I'm sure you can run it at a reasonable time. You don't have to run it at a later time. So the way it works is that you have minutes, right? And then you have hours, and then you have day of the month, and then you have month, and I think you have day of the week. That is what this stuff here represents. So for each one that you want to change, you can just change that and say, I want this to run at this minute, at this hour, at this day of the month, at this month, and at this day of the week. So in my case, I'm going to say I want it to run, let's say 11 p.m. And since it's on a 24-hour clock, so I'm just going to say 23, right? Because I want it to run at 11 p.m. So basically what it's doing, it's going to run this guy right here, and it's going to send the log over here in case there's logs. So in our case, it's going to send it to var log, and it's going to create a log file. So when it back up something, if something is wrong, you will take a look at the log file to see what's going on. If you want to see if things work, you can always do the log file to see what's going on as well. So right now it's saying that it runs at 11, but of course I don't want to run it at 11. I want to test it right now to see how it goes. So I'm going to change this to star, right? I'm going to get rid of the 0 here. I'm going to change that to star, and I'm going to change that to star. Basically what that's going to do is that it's going to tell it to run every minute. Let me get rid of that. Sorry. I'm going to go my note system, have that there. So I'm going to get rid of that. So now basically what I'm telling is I'm telling it to run every minute. So if everything works correctly, what's going to happen is that it's going to run every minute, which I'm going to change it, but it's going to run every minute and then back up those config file over. And if everything works correctly, we should be able to see the backup over at our PBS server, and we should be able to see several backup until we turn it off and change the time to backup at, let's say, 11 p.m. So again, you can change this to whatever you want. You can choose your day and your time and your month and all this other stuff. It's pretty granular, so it gives you a lot of options. As I say before, just one more time, the first one is minute, the second one is hour, the third one is day of the month, and then this guy right here is the month, and then this guy right here is the day of the week. So you can be very granular as to when you want this to run. It's basically up to you. Right? And then you can call this whatever you want as well. So if you don't want to call this Proxmox config backup, you can call this log file, whatever you want. So I'm going to go ahead and click Control X, yes, enter. And then if everything works correctly, and the way it's supposed to work, if we go back to our PBS server, we just need to give it some time. We should start seeing that it's backing up things and it's adding the date to things and it's making it look exactly the way that we want it to look, right? Because if we go back here, let's do nano, we added the date here. So we should also be able to not only see the date at the top level, but we should also be able to see the date at the archive file. I can't say archive. The archive file themselves. So let's give it a few minutes. There you go. So now, as we can see, that's already back up. So this is the first one. If we were to sit here and then just keep clicking refresh, you're going to see that it's going to back up every single minute. So, you know what? For the fun of it, I'm gonna waste the whole minute and just kind of refresh it until the other one loads. While we're waiting for it, guys, if you haven't done so already, please take the time to subscribe, take the time to like, take the time to say hey in the comment. There's little things that you do, they help out a lot. I am working on creating a lot of content. I'm actually working on, like I said earlier in the intro, I'm working on creating also project-based series as well that are going to leave on my website. It's going to be very project heavy. It's going to be well structured. I'm working on a lot of things, but with you guys' help, with the comments, with ideas, with all of these other things help a lot. So if you haven't done so, please do those things and also take the time to go over to the website and subscribe to my newsletter. So I'm going to click refresh one more time. So as you can see, that guy is already backed up as well. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want this to be backing up every minute. But if we go in here, for example, we can see that these are the two things that were backup. So this is our ETC network and then ETC PVE. You can see the date next to it. This is really good because it allows us to be able to see when things are back up, what time. This one automatically put a timestamp on it. But now we have a timestamp internal, as in the subfolder, to be able to see our backup archive file themselves have a timestamp on it. So it just makes it easier on us to be able to see, oh, okay, this backup was taken on this day. If I click refresh one more time, you can see that another one is being backed up. So I'm going to turn that off because I don't want it to be backing up every single minute. But that's how you set it up if you wanted to back up every single minute. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to say 0 minutes here, and I'm going to say 23 here because I wanted to back up at 11 p.m. Every day. So you can, again, set this up whatever way you want. Control X, Control yes, Control enter, and that's pretty much it. So now we have our script set up. I'm going to get rid of some of these in here because I don't really need all of it. We just need one to kind of go through the demo. So yes, and then I'm going to click yes, and now we only have one. So yeah, you can back this up as much as you want. You can set up whatever file you want. You can set up whatever schedule you want. You can set up back up whatever folder you want. So if you want to back up another folder, if we go back in here real quick, you can just add those folders here. So if you want to back up another folder, you're just going to copy this, paste the new line, add the folder that you want to back up, and that's it. Then you can back up anything you want on your Proxmox host. And that's pretty much how you go through the backup process. Before we jump into the restoration process, there are a few things we need to keep in mind. Most of the Proxmox documentation that I'm reading assume you're restoring to the same physical host, meaning identical nickname, disk layout, and storage pool. That, my friends, is the easy path. You install Proxmox, you restore your config, and then boom, you're back up. But as you guys know, the reality is not always that simple. If you're restoring to a different hardware, you will need to make sure that the skeletons of your old setup is in place before you start the restoration process. What this means is you will need to recreate your storage pools with the same names, update your network config to match your new NIC, be very selective about what you actually restore. What you do not want to do is that you do not want to just blindly dump everything back from your old host to your new host. Trust me when I tell you that is going to break your new host very quickly. So you want to be very selective, and we'll talk about that when we get to the restore process, about what you restore and also making changes so it can reflect your new server, especially when the hardware is not the same. Now, one of the things that you can do is browse the config file stored on your PBS server before you start the restoration process. This way you know exactly what you're putting back into your new host. You can take a look at some of your config, and we'll actually take a look at that as well on the new host as well as the PBS server. You can take a look at your config, see what was on your old host, kind of decide what you want to restore and what you don't want to restore. The point that I'm trying to get across is that this is not a perfectly straightforward process, but then again, that's pretty much everything in IT. Depending on your environment, you might need to do some cleanup after the restoration to get everything working the way you want it to work. All right, with those points out of the way, let's go ahead and let's kick off the restoration process. All right, so we're going to kick off the restoration process. So right now we are on PVE2. So this is what PVE2 looks like right now. There's nothing on it. It has a couple of storage on it, but there's nothing set up yet or anything configured. So if we go to network, we can see that we only have one bridge and then it only has one NIC. If we go to storage, scroll up here a little bit, go to disk. It has two disks, right? But nothing is really set up, LVM thin, because that's the way the initial setup was. Directories, EFS, nothing is really set up. No VM, no container whatsoever. Now the goal, or the end goal, is that we want to transfer everything that we had in PVE1 over to PVE2. We're assuming that PVE1 is completely dead. PVE1 is not coming back up. However, we know for a fact that we have backup of PVE1 config right here on our PBS server. So these are the PVE1 config. We know for a fact that we have that. So we were like, okay, you know what? We have peace of mind that we have that. We can restore some things. But we also know that we have some of our VMs in here, right? So the two VMs that we were working on, test VM, and then we have test CT and test VM. So we know that we have our containers backup, and we know that we have our config backup. Now we want to see if we can get the PVE2 up to the point where it makes sense for us to say like, we have a lot of our stuff restored, especially our VMs. So that's the process that we're going to kick off here. So to kick that off, the first thing that I would say you do is make sure you go to your stuff here, I'm going to minimize this, your node, right? Check your repository. Where is it? Check your repository. Sorry, go check your updates. Make sure it's pointing to the right repository. Check your updates. Make sure you don't have any updates. If you do have updates, make sure you run those updates. Normally do that to get that out of the way before you kind of kick things off. I don't think I have any updates, but if you do, make sure you run it. So to kick things off, we're going to go to shell. And the first thing that we want to do is similar to what we did for our backup process, is that we want to connect to our PBS server. It's very similar to what we did for our backup. We want to communicate we want this server, the PVE2 server, to be able to communicate with our PBS server to make sure that it's able to see the backup and to make sure that it's able to pull the backup. And we're going to do something very similar that we did. So I'm going to be copying, because these are very long and heavy commands. So I'm just going to be copying them over. So what we want to do is we want to connect. So similar to what we did, set our variables, right? Set our PBS information here, and then we're going to set our PBS password, which is our API key. We're going to set that variable. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to pretty much just say like, hey, can we see all of the backup that are available in here? Mainly, let me go back here, which is this guy. Can we see the snapshots that you have of our config file from our PVE server? And to be able to do that, we're going to run this command. I'm going to paste that in. Right. So basically, we're saying it like, hey, we're trying to communicate. We're calling the Proxmox Backup client. We're saying like, hey, can you show us the snapshot repository? And we're pointing it to this guy. So keep in mind that this is the name of your user. So if we go back to PBS here, we'll go to access here. We go to user. So that's the name of our user. Right. You're going to need that. And just like we did in the previous backup session. And then, of course, you're going to need the name of your key, right? So this is the name of your key. If we go back here, we'll go to API token. We'll click on that. We can see that that's the name of our key. And again, this is just a separation. The exclamation is just a separation between the two of them, this guy. And then we're telling it like, hey, look at this server, which is the Proxmox Backup Server. And then we're saying, look at this data store, which is the dev PBS data store, which is pretty much just this guy, right? And then we're telling it like, hey, can you check it for us and see and tell us and give us information back as to like, hey, what snapshot is available that we can use, right? So it's going to ask you like, hey, sure you want to connect? You're going to click yes in terms of fingerprint and click enter, click yes again and click enter. And that's perfectly fine. It said that's closed. We're going to clear. And then we're going to run that one more time. And now you're going to see that it's going to give us the information. So basically what it's telling us there is like, hey, for a snapshot, I can see only one snapshot. And this is the size of the snapshots. These are the things, the archive files that you have in that snapshot. So one, we have etc network. And then it's telling us like, hey, also, it looks like you have something else called etc PVE in there. These are files that are automatically created. Kind of like a metadata file for Proxmox Backup, but you don't have to worry about these too much. There's two, but these are the two here that we have to worry about. And if we go back, we can see that that's the case. If we go in here, right, we can see that we have these two guys right here. Now, what I was saying earlier is that you do not want to just restore these things over to your new server, to this server that we're working on, and say just push everything over and just call it a day. That will break a lot of things, right? Because especially if you're working on something where it's not one for one, your machine, your whole old host machine is not the same as your new host machine. If it's not one for one, it's going to break a lot of things. So you want to be very picky, or even sometimes make some changes to some of the config files that you're going to copy over so it reflects your new machine. That's very important. Right. So I'm going to leave this up for a minute because we're going to need that. Now, the next thing that we want to do is that, like I said, we don't want to just copy things over and say like, hey, let's just copy this over and then make things exactly the same way it was before. So what I would advise we do, or what I would do in my case, is that I will create a folder in the MNT directory and then restore everything in that folder. And then I will go in there and then start checking config files, looking at things and saying like, okay, this is good, this is not good, before I start restoring things over. And to do that, we're going to create a folder or subfolder. So we're going to say mkdir. We're going to create a folder here in the MNT folder, which is the mount point. We're going to call it PBS restore. And this is where we're going to restore this guy, right? And this guy, right? Just so we can check things before we start copying over. So let's go ahead and create that folder. And then we're going to go ahead and CD into that folder. MNT PBS, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, PBS, okay, and then ls. Captures on ls. We can see that there's nothing in that folder right now, but that's exactly where we want it to be right now. We want to be able to say like, hey, we're going to restore everything in this folder, so we don't restore it directly in our machine and break things. So I'm going to go back here real quick and then list this stuff one more time. Now, I'm going to copy another command over that's going to restore. Let me paste that in. This first command is basically going to restore our network config. So again, what we're doing here, we're saying Proxmox Backup client, we're saying we want to restore, and we're telling it like, hey, this is the archive snapshots that we're looking at, which is pretty much the name of this guy, right? That's very important. That's why I said you're going to need that. And then going down, we're telling it like, hey, this is the archive that we want to restore, which is pretty much the name of this guy, etc PVE. Let's start with the PV and then we'll move on to the network. We'll tell that we want to restore this archive folder and from this snapshots. So basically, that's pretty much what it is. We're saying calling the backup client. We're saying restore. We're telling it what archive folder. what archive snapshots, and we're telling it what archive folder we want to restore, and we're telling it, can you please restore that to the etc/pve folder. So remember, etc pbs restore is what we just created, is what we're actually in right now, and we're telling it that's where we want you to restore this thing. So if I click enter, if everything worked and I click ls, we can see that that content is now being restored. And if we go cd in there, so cd etc in here ls, we can see that it restore everything that we need that we had in our previous host. So what we've done so far is that we've restored our backup from our PBS server, this guy, we've restored over to our new server, right? But we haven't really implemented the changes yet to reflect it on the new host, right? So the next thing that we need to restore, I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to go back up. The next thing that we need to restore is our network config. And to do that, the command again is very similar. I'm going to copy that, paste that in, and similar, we're telling it like, hey, this is what we want to restore. We're calling the client, we restore, we're telling it like we want to restore from this guy, we want to restore etc network config, which is pretty much this guy, right? And then we're telling it we want to restore it in here, and we're calling this one etc network. Click enter, and then if we do ls one more time, cd dot here, go back, ls, now we can see that we have both our network and our etc pve folder. Now we have both of the folders that we backed up now on our new server. So that's good. So now we don't really need to worry too much about the PBS server anymore. We will worry about it later on in the video, but now for now, we have everything that we need over on the new server. Now it's just a matter of how do we restore things. So the first thing that we need to do is let's start with the network. So if I go to network here, for example, I go to network, then you can see that there's one interface in here, and then there's one bridge, right? Now, I'm going to go back to shell. If we go to cd ls here, okay, I'm in the main folder. So cd mnt pbs enter ls. We're going to cd into the etc/network folder here. All right, ls. So this is what we backed up from, or we restored from our backup. We're going to take a look at the interfaces, right, to see what was on our old machine. So we're going to do nano interface. Nano interface there. And this is what our old machine looked like. So this is what I was saying when I was saying like, hey, you might need to do some cleanup. You will definitely need to do some cleanup, especially if your machine is not one for one, because as we can see here, this machine had like about 3 interfaces, wherein this new one only have 1, right? It had a bridge where this new one, 2 bridges where this new one only have 1. But there's only one change that I'm going to make, because I do want you guys to see the effect of like transferring things over without cleaning things up. The one thing that I want to change is that if I go to VMBR 0, all right, what I want to change is 55. The IP address for the old machine is 55. However, if I leave this as 55 right now, this new machine's new IP address is going to be 55 as well, right? Now, I'm assuming that that old machine will be dead, and you'll be like, yeah, cool, that's fine. But if you don't want it to be 55, which in my case in this restore, I want it to be 58, because the IP address for this machine is 58. I'm just going to do 58. But just do be careful, because if you do not change this and then you transfer this over and you copy it over and wipe out the old config for this VM, it's going to break a lot of things, right? Well, it's going to break the GUI, because then you're not going to be able to reach your Proxmox VE from the old IP address. It's going to reflect this new IP address. So just keep that in mind. This applies for your gateway, for your subnet. You just keep that in mind, that whatever it is in here, that's going to wipe out the old one. So you want to make sure this is accurate before you copy things over, right? All right, so I'm going to click X here, click yes, click enter. All right, just for clarity, let's just go to cd etc pve here. Or network, actually, network. And this one is actually the machine, what the machine has right now. So if we look at nano and do interface, enter, we can see that the current config for this is pretty much just 1 bridge and 1 NIC, right? That's perfectly fine. So click X. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to copy our network config over. And ideally, what that is going to do is going to replace everything that you have in here right now. Right? So if we go back to network before we even copy, we can see that there's only 1 bridge and 1 NIC, right? So if we go back, if we run this guy, we're telling it to copy. Let me just clear. We're telling it to copy, right? CP-A. Dash A means that copy everything, copy things that are hidden, copy things recursively, just copy everything over to this folder. So we're copying everything from the MMT, our mount point, and we're copying it over to etc.network. So if I click enter, and I click and I go now, I'm going to clear this and I go back now to network, we can see that that completely just copy everything over. So our new network config now reflects our old network config, VMBR1, VMBR0. We have 3 NICs. So now you're going to have to do some cleanup. So if you don't have 3 NICs here, which in this case, this VM don't, this host don't, you're going to have to clean this up, kind of make it reflect your new VM, just kind of clean things up a little bit. But if it's one for one, then you don't have to necessarily do some cleanup. You might need to do some cleanup in terms of like the nickname and things like that. But you're perfectly fine if it's one for one. Say your VM just completely died and you just reinstall Proxmox on that physical hardware, you just reinstall Proxmox, then it's perfectly fine, right? But if you're doing it on a different machine, then you might need to do some cleanup. I'm going to leave that alone, but I just wanted to kind of do that so you guys can see that. So now we know that our network config is good to go, right? So now we know that like, hey, our network config is good. Everything is looking good. We don't have to worry about our network config, but please take the time to clean up some things before you restore things. The next thing that we want to restore, if I'm going to go back to cd/etc, MNT, PVE or PBS, restore, ls, cd, etc, PVE, ls. Now, the next thing that we're going to restore is our server and our LXC container, right? And when I mean restore, I mean that we're going to restore the config for those for the VMs in the container. If we look over here on our data center, you can see that we don't have our VM and our container set up. We do want to restore that because we do want to restore our config for those VMs. That's very important, right? Because a lot of times when you set up VM, you set up a lot of different configs. So we want to restore those configs. So it's very important for us to go through the restoration process for those config before we try to restore the data for those VMs. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to go back to shell, shell, and I'm going to do CD one more time. MNT here, PBS here, LS, and then I'm going to CD into etc PVE. PVE is, like we talked about, is the kind of like the folder that holds everything. And I'm going to do LS, and we want to restore this guy. If I go into CD Q ls, we can see that we had a VM called 100.config. We had a config file here called 100.config, which was our VM. Our Ubuntu VM that we set up. If I do something like nano 100, right, you can see this is the config file for our VM, right? It gives us all of the config file, test VM, and a different config that we had set for our VM. This helps a lot because it means that you don't have to manually recreate that VM with the configs in mind anymore, right? So that's what we're going to do. And if you have several of them in here, you're going to see all of them, 100, 200, all of them in here, right? Because we backed it up. Again, remember, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but this part of the backup only restore your config, not your VM. And I'll show you guys that in a minute. So what we want to do is we want to run a very similar command that we just ran. So we're just going to paste, I'm going to paste that in. So basically what we're doing here, we're telling it like, hey, copy CP-A, very similar to the previous command. And we're saying copy everything in our man points that's in the QEMU server folder. Everything in there. So if you have several VMs in there, it's just basically going to copy everything, because the asterisk means copy everything with any sort of name .config. So it's going to copy all of your config, your VM config in there, and it's going to copy it to the right place, which is etc PVE QEME server on this server. So look over here, real careful. Look over here where my mouse is, like, which is the data center. We don't see any VM right now. But once I click enter here, now we should be able to start seeing on the data center here. There you go. We should be able to start seeing like the VM is starting to be created. So as you can see, that our VM is now created and we're able to see it. So now if we click on it, our VM has been restored. We have our memory, we have our config. So this is beautiful, because if you have a lot of config that you put into your VMs, you don't want to kind of go back and then be able to recreate it from scratch when something happens. But for now, you're going to see that like, hey, our VM has been restored, everything is good to go. But you can't start this obviously, right? Because the data hasn't been restored yet. Only the config has been restored. So if I try to start this, it's going to fail, and it's most likely going to tell me that it's failing because of storage reasons. So you see that? Because again, we haven't created our storage yet. We haven't restored anything that have to do with our storage yet. And even if we do restore our storage, we still need to restore our VM data in the storage for it to be able to work. And we'll get to that. Right. So now our VM is up. The next thing that we need to restore is our container. So we're going to go back to our shell. We're going to clear, and then we're going to do something very similar, but this time around, we're going to restore our LXC container. So if I go back to CD, etc, MNT, PBS here, ls, and then CD, etc here, PVE, and then ls one more time, and then do CD LXC. So this is the other config that's in the PVE folder. So LXC there, ls here, and we're going to see that we have 101, which is our config. So if we do nano 101 config, we can see that this is our config file for our LXC container. So I'm going to get out of it, very similar to our VM. What we want to do now is we want to copy our LXC container over to the VM. So you see here, we don't have any container set up on the data center here, on the tab here. We don't have any container set up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this in. So something similar again, we're doing cp-a, we're copying all of our config for our LXC container, and we're copying it over to here, which is our LXC container. We'll click enter, and now we should be able to see our LXC container here coming up. So as you can see, if I expand this is being created, right? Give it a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, not minutes. You're going to see that the LXC container is now created, and it's called test CT. And then if I go to option, all of our options, if I go to what is it? The hardware, network, hardware, resource, console, options, all of the things that we had in our old one is pretty much here, right? So there you go. So our config, both of our VMs are now being restored. Our VM and our container has now been restored like it was in our previous host. However, again, we are not able to start things, right? Because, well, we don't have the storage set up yet. All right, so now that we have our containers up and running, our VMs up and running, our network up and running on our host, kind of starting to look similar to our previous host. The next thing that we need to worry about is our storage, because that's very important, right? Because without the storage, we can't really restore the VM data to be able to restart the VM and get them back up and running exactly the same way they were in the old host, right? So the next thing that we need to restore is the storage. So to do that, we're going to do something very similar. What we're going to do is I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to take a look at the storage config that we have right now, and I'm going to copy that over to our local VM. So I'm going to do CD, and I'm going to do etc, not MNT here, PBS, I forgot to just PBS, and then ls, CD etc. Again, we're just going back into that mount point that we created, right? So ls, and then what we're going to do is we're going to look at this guy, what it looks like. So I'm going to do nano storage.config. So as you can see here, we have a lot more in here, right? So we have test, we have LVM thin. This is the two ones, and these are the two ones that we created, but we don't have them here yet. So if I go back here and then just click on that, we can see that those are not created yet. So what we want to do is we basically just want to copy it over like we've been doing for the previous one. Just copy things over to our new setup. So I'm going to paste the command here. I'm going to paste that in. And then basically what we're doing here, very similar to what we've been doing so far, we're saying cp-a, a mount point. We're looking at the mount point that we created, and we're copying storage over to our PVE folder, and we're replacing the storage folder that's already currently there, right? So we're going to click enter. Now, that is already copied over. Now, if I was to go to, let's say, CD, etc, PVE here, this is the local VM now. It's not the mount point anymore. And then click ls, and then do CD storage, right? Nano storage, because it's a file. Enter. You can see that has been copied over. It copied everything over, but one of the things that you will notice is that it says PVE1 and PVE2. Now, I mean, PVE1 and then PVE1 here. Now, The reason why it's saying that is because our old VM was called PV, our old host was called PVE1, right? But we don't necessarily need to change this because again, if we look here, we can see that even though this has been copied over, we still don't see it here yet. What we're going to do is we're going to create, this is what I was saying earlier, that you're going to need to create a skeleton, right? So we're going to create something to similar as this name. So Proxmox is basically just going to add that in here to be like, okay, PVE1 and PVE2 are used in this test2 storage. So just keep in mind that, and we're going to take a look at that in a minute. So right now it just says PVE1, right? We can see that in here. If we go to the VM, if we go to disk, we go to directory, we're not able to see that. But if we go to data center and we go to storage, we can see that, we can see those things already in here, right? We can see them. We could be like, oh, those are already mounted at the data center level, right? But the data center is seeing it, but the data center to the data center is probably just looking like, hey, this stuff belongs to PVE1, right? So it's saying that like, oh, only PVE1 is the owner of this guy right here, right? We need to add PVE2, right? But we're not going to do that at the data center level. We're going to X out of this. We're just going to recreate it, right? The next thing that we need to do, we now need to go back to storage, right? We're going to now our storage config has been copied over. Now we just need to tell Proxmox like, hey, I need to create another directory, but this directory is already in there. So look at the directory that's already in there and then just attach this to it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it will make sense in a minute, right? So if I go to directory and I click on create, and I'm going to say like this guy, and I'm going to say ext4, and I'm going to call it test. And you want to create it here because if you go in and change it there, and then now you try to create test here, Proxmox is going to tell you like, oh no, I can't do that because test is already created and PVE is already created on PVE, so you can recreate a new storage called test. So you want to create it here. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to call it test, right? And then we're going to click create, and then it's going to go ahead and create that, right? And I'm not going to create a ZFS yet, so you guys can see the difference of what I'm talking about here. So now that's created. Now we're able to see test PVE here. Now if we go back here and then go to shell, 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 and then go to cd slash etc here, and then PVE, enter, and then nano storage, right? And then we can see that, you can see then like, oh, Proxmox has now add PVE2 as part of this test directory, but the ZFS still has test2. And now if we go back to data center, we'll go to directory, sorry, not this guy, we'll go to directory. I'm sorry, I'm clicking everything but the directory. We'll go to directory, we can see that Proxmox is saying that, oh, this stuff has PV1 and PVE2. Even though Proxmox don't know what PVE1 is, it's saying that like, oh yeah, it belongs to PVE1 and PVE2. So what we can do is we're going to go ahead and recreate the storage as well for ZFS, right? Because I think it was called test2, if I'm not mistaken. So ZFS, create. We only have one. We're going to call it same name, test2, right? Single, perfectly fine, create. And that's done. Now we have test2 and test1. We can see those now here on the side on our storage here. If we go back to our shell, right? Where is it? Where is it? Shell. And then we go back into that CD, or maybe just nano, MNT, PBS here, and then storage. STORAGE. What is this? Storage does something. It's PVE, etc, PVE, and then storage. There you go. Enter. Now, if we go there, we can see that test2. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Hold on. Get back out of there. I was looking at the mount point. I need to look at the real thing. So nano slash etc slash pve slash storage. There you go. Now you can see that it's saying that like, oh yeah, now PVE1 and PVE2, right, are attached to it. But we don't necessarily need PVE1 anymore. So we can do some cleanup here. We don't need that anymore. We can do some cleanup here. Again, just keep in mind that before you do all of this cleanup and you do the things that you need to do here, just create them first. Mount your storage, as in like your file, your config, and then create those skeletons so they can attach to your config, and then rename it. Because if you rename it and then just add it in here before you create the storage, it's going to tell you like, hey, you can't do that. So just keep that in mind because it already exists. Yes, enter. So now if we go to data center, we'll look at this guy, and it's telling us that only PVE2, which is exactly what we want, right? Perfect. So now our storage are up and running, right? If we go to our VMs, we can see that if we go to hardware, where is it? Where is my, oh man, hardware? We can see that this guy is pointing to test, right? But again, even if we start a study right now, it's not going to work because the data doesn't exist in test yet. If we go back in here, if I can click and go to resource, this again is a test, but that data doesn't exist. So if we go to test, for example, here, right? We don't, if we see, what is it? There's ISO, there's backup, there's VM disk. That doesn't exist here. So if you try to start this VM or this container, it's going to fail. So if we go back, let's go back here, right? CT volume doesn't exist. VM disk doesn't exist. Okay, so now we have everything in place. The next thing that we need to do now is now we need to reconnect our PBS server, this server, to our new environment so we can restore the data for the VMs. Because without that data, if we go to console and we try to start this thing, right, click start, it's not going to work. Even though now the storage exists, but there is no data for that VM and that storage. Proxmox is going to be like, yeah, my brother in Christ, I don't know what you're talking about, so I cannot start those things because they do not exist. It was just pretending starting and then fail. So what we want to do is we want to reconnect our PBS server to this VM and then restore our VM data, which are these two guys right here. We want to restore this data, which is pretty much demo, what is it, test, and then CT test. We want to be able to restore it, right? And we're going to be able to restore it because if you see here, CT test 101, and then you see here demo 103. And if we go back here, you can see that you have 100 and 101. Let me go back here. Where's 100, 100, 100, 100, 100? There you go, 100 and 101. That needs to match because once we connect it, Proxmox is going to pick it up and you see the minute. It's going to pick it up on the backup section to be like, hey, you already have data that is available to be restored for this particular VM, and we can see it here and restore it. Right now we can't see it. If I go there, we can't see it. Go back to backup, we can't see it. But let's go ahead and connect our PBS to our virtual environment, to our Proxmox virtual environment. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to data center. We're going to go to storage. We're going to go to add here. We're going to say Proxmox. We're going to go over here. We're going to go to our storage. This is the PBS. We're going to go to summary, show config, and the name of it, of course. We're just going to copy things over. Right, and then we're going to see the host, which is pretty much this guy. The username is pretty much just this guy, root, right? And there you go. And then the password, you want to enter the password. I hope I enter it right. Maybe not, but then we'll find out soon enough. And what else is needed? We need the fingerprint. We're going to copy that, all right, and then paste that over. And then this node is PVE2. And the data store is pretty much this guy because that's where our data is. All right. And then we're going to paste that in. And then the namespace is dev, if I'm not mistaken, is dev. So DEV. Right. And I think I got the password right. Let's click add. I got the password wrong. You can tell you have the password wrong because it does that. So I'm going to do, let's see if I got it right this time around. There you go. I have the password right. So PBS has been added. So it's doing its thing. So remember, when we went to the VM and we click on backup, we didn't see anything. But now if we go to this VM, boom, there you go. Our backup is now ready to be restored. That's beautiful. We have our VM config up and running. We have our storage back up and running. Now we have our VM data that we just need to restore and see if everything works the way it's supposed to work. So again, if we go to this guy as well, we can see that boom, it's there. And the only way it's able to find that is because the 101 matches the same number that you see here, 101. If the number is different, it's not going to be able to find that. So be very mindful of that when you're doing backup. You want to make sure that you're backing up things in let me go back. You want to make sure you're backing up things. Let me go back here. Let me go to content. You want to make sure you're backing up things in a namespace that you're going to point your new host to. So anything that you're backing up that has to do with VM, put it in a separate namespace, right? I hope that makes sense. The namespace here is dev. Put it in a namespace when you want to restore things from your new VM, that is the namespace that this new VM is going to point to, because when you restore things, they're going to match here 101, 100, and that's what the backup server is going to look for to be able to see the backup for that particular VM. That's very important. Let's go ahead and start restoring our data now. We're going to start with our test VM, and I do want to show you guys something in regards to the storage. So we're going to restore this to its original storage, and we're going to restore this to a different storage, just so you guys can see that like you can even create a new storage and then be able to restore things. You don't have to restore it one for one, and it should work just fine. So for this guy, which is our test VM, what we're going to do is we're going to select our backup. We're going to say restore. Actually, let's take a look at that real quick. If we go to hardware, we can see that this was already located in, let me see, it located in test. I didn't have to click on that. You can see that the storage that it was using is test, right? But again, we can change this if we want. But for demo purposes, let's just say this guy, we're going to click on it. We're going to click on backup. We're going to click on this backup. We're going to say restore, and we're going to say yes, restored in test, because we have that storage created already. Why not? We're going to say start after restore, right? And you can make all the changes if you want, and we're going to click restore, and we're going to see it's telling us like, hey, the VM, this will be permanently erased current VM data and all that stuff. That's perfectly fine. There is no data. Click yes, and it's going to go ahead and kick off the restore process. And depending on how big your VM is, depending on how much data it has, it's going to take some time to do the restoration process. So just give it some time. Again, this is kind of one for one. So we're restoring this VM to our test storage that we created. So it's a lot more easier. But for the container, we're going to restore it on a different storage. Just so I want you guys to, because I think one of the questions that you get asked, someone asked on the comment for the PBS server was that, can you just restore it on a different storage? And yes, you can. You can set up a completely different storage that's different from what you had before and be able to restore it. So my server is a little bit slow. That's my next video to update it. So we're going to let this do its thing, and we're going to come back. All right, so everything is done restoring now. So our VM is, you can see the VM is already up and running. Our restoration is done. So now if we go to console here, we can see, hopefully we can see the VM is starting to boot up. So this is really great because, again, now you're able to restore your config, you're able to restore your VM. You don't have to kind of be like, oh my God, everything is wiped out. Why is it wiped out? I'm running into an issue. But as you can see, the VM is back up and running. It's already logged into. We can go in there and take a look. Everything is working perfectly fine. And really, this is the power of Proxmox and the power of like the whole Proxmox backup and all those other things. It's just amazing. The process in itself is extremely tedious, but the reality is that if you take the time to go through it, everything works the way it's supposed to work, and you don't have the headache of like kind of worrying like, oh my God, I'm going to lose everything that I've created. So this VM is up and running. Let's go ahead and try to see if we can restore this guy as well. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. We're going to say restore. And the beauty is about this thing is that it allows you to even restore files. It allows you to be able to do a lot of things, man. So the Proxmox Backup Server is really like, kind of like, if you combine it with this technique that this whole process that I just went through, and combine it with like backing up your VM, you can see that it's a really kind of like an all-in-one system to be able to back up your host and your VMs. It takes a lot of work to restore, especially when it comes to the host, but it works, you know? So we're going to go ahead and click restore here. And then we're going to say like, you know what, let's do something different. Let's restore it to test 2 instead of test, because this one was already added to test. So we're going to say restore to test 2. Perfectly fine. Start after boot, and then click restore. We're going to say yes. And it's going to go through and do the restoration process. Again, this is what I wanted to show you guys when I said you can either restore it on the same storage, or you can restore it on a different storage. It doesn't really matter. For the Proxmox Backup Server, it's irrelevant as to what storage you restore it to. So that is irrelevant. You can restore it to any storage you want. So task is done. This was a lot more quicker because it's just a container lighter. So now, as you can see, that the container is already up. So we'll go to container. And there you go. So we're able to log in. Hopefully I remember the password. There you go. Our container is up and running. Our VM is up and running, right? Exactly the way it was on PVE 1. So PVE 2 now is completely restored to look like PVE 1. Our storage are up and running. Our network is looking exactly the same, except we need to do some cleanup here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So we're able to back up our host, back up our VM, restore our host when everything crashes and everything dies, and then restore our VM. So that's pretty much how you go through the whole backup and restoration process of your host and your VMs. All right, so that is pretty much it. That is how you back up your Proxmox host config and VM to your Proxmox Backup Server. Now, the big benefit here is that everything lives in one central location, and from there, you can even set up offsite or cloud backup for extra security and peace of mind. I'll be putting up a poll to see if you guys want me to create a video on setting up a full system backup for the Proxmox host. So keep an eye out for that, and definitely don't forget to vote if you do want to see that video. And of course, if you haven't done so already, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and drop a hey in the comment. It really helps the channel grow. Oh, and don't forget, go to my website, link is in the description box below, to subscribe to my newsletter, because I'm working on some cool stuff. And if you subscribe, once they come out, I'm gonna send out a message so you guys know that it's out. As always, stay geeking, stay curious, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.